get here. All right. Great to be here with you all. My name is Gershom Margolis. I am the founder of Imperial Advisory. We are a fractional CFO firm. We work with what I'll call lower middle market businesses in general from 5 million to 50 million of revenue. So businesses that are usually family or founder led, but we work with all sorts of businesses, and we go into businesses and we help them make better business decisions. So in a larger business, usually the CFO is a very prominent role and very important role, important advisor to the CEO. In smaller businesses where they don't necessarily need that full time, we come in and we help them on a part-time basis. Again, usually we work for the CEO. Sometimes our clients, especially the larger ones, will have a CFO that will work for the CFO. We pick up where accounting leaves off. And again, we work for the CEO or the CFO and help them get back to doing what they do best. We have several people from our team here, Mark and Barry, and a few people whose faces I can't see, and Brittany, of course, who put this all together. So thank you so much for all being here. Thank you to our guests here. Thank you to our guests on LinkedIn. And now I'll segue into Jay. I met Jay a while ago, probably a year or two ago, and we've been talking a whole bunch. And Jay is always providing good insights. It's always a pleasure to speak with and to interact with. And I don't remember if it was my idea or his idea, but we're so happy to have him here to share with us some insights on how to build a killer sales process. And that's really important because, when we think about what we do, our job is to help businesses grow. And there's lots of ways to grow, but one of the very important ways that you grow are through sales. And even if you're growing through M&A or in other ways, you have to know how to sell. And so we're so pleased to have Jay here to teach us more about that. Jay, you're welcome to introduce yourself and then take it away.
Thanks, Gershom, and thanks everybody for joining. Jay Pila, JP Global Consulting, based in New York City. I have the benefit of doing sales management consulting in 30 plus countries around the world, serving businesses as large as 6 billion in revenues and pre-revenue, everything in between across industry. So I've picked up a few nuggets along the way in my career and happy to share them with you today, specifically around building a killer sales process, but we'll go into some other areas as well. I'm going to share a screen. I may or may not see people hitting the chat. So if I don't see your messages and you're trying to get my attention, just start screaming or jumping up and down and I'll stop and take questions. Otherwise, happy to take questions at the end as well. Let me see if this works. How do I move this guy? Here we go. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Gershon, are you able to see my screen?
I can see it, yes.
Okay, terrific. Great. So I'm going to just walk through some slides that keep me on point, but really we're going to talk about a few different things. But the main thing is to answer against the typical types of questions I hear, which are, why am I not winning more business? Or why am I winning so few of the deals that I'm pursuing if I'm trying to win a piece of business? How can I improve the quality or the amount of opportunities that enter the top of my pipeline, meaning that the number of opportunities that I get an opportunity to pitch my services or products? Or why can't I break the ceiling? I've been at $5 million company for years. I can't seem to figure out how to get to 6, 7, or 8. If something's happening, I just can't get ahead of it. Or why am I selling successfully, but every year I look at what we're generating in EBITDA and it's going in the wrong direction? That's something I hear frequently as well. And finally, something that I've been dealing with more recently, more on exit strategy planning, is why is private equity going to hold me to a 3-year earnout? So these are the typical types of questions that I get asked in forums like this. And there are a few ways to get ahead of that, but one of them for sure is having what I'll call the winning sales process, the killer sales process. But it's also about how are you going to market? What is your business development team doing? And how are you bringing them on? How are you onboarding them, managing them, coaching them, and incenting them? And so we're going to cover, all of that in the context of an overall sales playbook. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit as well about some CRM. So it really does start with having your sales playbook. And a sales playbook, if you ask 10 people, you might get 10 different answers as to what a sales playbook is. So we're going to talk about what my definition of a sales playbook is, why you need one, and then some things you need to do to keep it fresh. So for example, I go through processes with my clients where we'll build out a sales playbook. It generally takes, if we're meeting once a week for 90 minutes or so, it'll take about 3 months to get done. But then it's a question of, okay, now you got a playbook. What are you doing with it? And then how are you keeping it fresh every year? Are you bringing people back together and updating certain elements of market conditions or changes on the services or products that you're providing or your team? It's really critical tool. It is the foundation for what gets everybody on the same page. It's a common data dictionary that you can use for business development. So it's a really, really important thing to keep fresh and updated. A playbook generally has 3 main sections. Mine does anyway. One is your strategy. The second is your process, how you go to market. And then the third is what I call hero stories. And we're going to talk about hero stories a bit deeper into the presentation. But you might think of these as case studies. And I'm going to actually try to get you thinking a little bit differently about how you have case studies or white papers about what you do and think about something called a hero story. So we'll start with strategy. There are a few essential components to your sales strategy, and they are comprised with answering these types of questions. Who are your best customers and why are they your best customers? Is it a certain size of business? Is it a certain industry? Is it a certain geographic area? One of the things I hear all the time, what defines a good customer? The first thing I hear is they pay their bills on time. And, okay, I get that, but let's go deeper. Let's really understand more about, the essence of the type of customer that you're trying to sell to. And in many cases, I'm working directly with the owners or founders of businesses who have maybe a strong point of view about who they want to serve. And if they're in a position where that they can be that selective, I encourage you to take that into consideration. In thinking about who your best customers are, really understanding what is it about your products or services or your culture or your business that compels them to buy from you. There's a thing I'm going to say a few times today that's really, really important, which is that people make buying decisions on emotion, and they support that decision with data. People make buying decisions on emotion, and they support that with data. So it's really, really important to understand the journey that you take your customers on before they become a customer, where you can connect with them emotionally. And again, it's you having the ability to make a decision about whether or not you want to sell to this type of customer. And if not, don't even waste your time. What are those real important attributes of your best customers? As I said before, is it size? Is it number of employees? Is it markets that they serve? If you're in a B2B world, it's really important to understand the customers that your customers are serving and what influences their success. Having a good understanding of that is really important to understanding the strategy that you have in going after the customers that you want to attract. And who are those customers that you specifically do not want to work with? I ask that question a lot, and the initial reaction is, oh, I'll work with anybody, right? But then when you really dive down, again, beyond the I don't want to work with somebody that can't pay the bills, there might be some other reasons why there are certain segments of the market that you just don't want to serve. For example, I don't want to do anything in food service. Okay, there maybe is a reason for that. Maybe you've had a bad experience there and you don't want to replicate that experience, whatever it may be. Yeah, being intentional about that is really important. The second is understanding your overall market. And I define the market as, I call it TAM, SAM, SOM. I don't know if you guys have heard that before. TAM stands for the total addressable market, which is evidenced by the overall bubble. Then within that, you have a serviceable available market. And within that, you have a serviceable obtainable. And so understanding what your addressable market looks like and being able to segment it by what's available and what's obtainable is really important, because that's going to also give you some insights as to what the differences are between what's obtainable and available, and do you need to move that needle? Is your total addressable market growing? Is the compound annual growth rate of your addressable market growing at something greater than 5% a year? If so, then maybe not so much of a big issue. But if you're in a market that doesn't have that growth, then it's going to be really important for you to be able to think about growing the obtainable segment of the total addressable market in order for you to be able to grow and gain more wallet share of the entire industry. This is something that I find to be the most important, and it's really understanding your buyer personas. And that starts with understanding, when we're selling, who are we selling to within our customers? Is it the CEO? Is it the CFO? Is it the CMO? Is it penultimate C-suite? Is it head of IT? Is it a product manager? Whomever it is, understand who these buyer personas are. And we're going to identify them, and then we're going to go through a process to stereotype the hell out of them. I want to know, where did they go to school? What type of education do they have? I want to know what their biases are. For example, if you're selling to creative agencies, their biases technically are probably more Apple. So that might be important in understanding that when you're going through a sales journey. What are their pain points? What are their goals? Most people, if they're not owners of businesses, the first and number one goal is they want a promotion. They want to get a bonus. They want to get promoted to the board of directors. Whatever it is, understand that, and then figure out what are the things that have to happen in their career for that to happen. And do the products or services that you're providing lend towards those goals? That is really, really important, because if you can connect with your buyer emotionally and understand how your products or services are serving their personal goals, you are way ahead of the game. The classic question, hey, what's keeping you up at night? Listen for the 3 or 4 things that really, really influence the stresses and anxieties that they have in their job. And if you can tie your products or services to those pain points, then you've got a winning proposal for starting a sales process with this particular buyer persona. And in understanding the buyer persona, you're able to actually find a way to create a path towards urgency. And this is one of the things that I find missing the most in a sales process, is understanding how to unearth the urgency to getting to a decision. So many times when I'm starting to work with my clients, what I'm finding is they have these prolonged, sales processes where they have deals that are sitting in their pipeline for way too long. And when I ask why, and I can't get a straight answer. And it all boils down to the customer not having urgency. So being able to figure out where the urgency is and leaning into that urgency is going to serve you well.
Jay, question.
Yes.
Are you recommending leaning into the urgency at a particular buyer, or leaning into buyers that have urgency? Meaning, is there a way to develop the urgency or uncover it when you look and it doesn't seem like it's urgent? Or
Yes.
you're just saying ignore those people?
No. Well, listen, if I have to pick, if I've got 10 prospects, 5 of them, the urgency is absolutely clear, and 5 of them it's not, I'm going to lean towards where there's urgency, because there's some work required to develop the urgency. But sometimes that urgency is there. Your buyers just don't know it. And by asking the right questions, you're able to drive to that urgency. So for example, if I was selling CFO services to you, Gershon, and I said to you, so Gershon, if you don't do anything with your financial operation right now in the next 90 days, how does that impact your business?
Okay. Good
Right?
question.
Right. And what ends up happening is if you're selling, let's say, to perhaps a CFO or an owner of a business, and they start thinking about it and they're like, oh crap. This is more important than I thought it was. So it's,
Right.
when I say finding the path to curated urgency, what I'm saying is being very, very intentional about the types of questions you're asking to, number one, verify that the urgency is really there. And number two, helping your buyer discover their own urgency.
Mhm.
Make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Can I ask another question? Or
Please.
okay, what happens when you're selling to someone on behalf? I think I know the answer. Don't sell to this person, but you're selling to someone on behalf of someone else. So we have a CEO who contacted us recently. He needed help with something. He's like, why don't you just talk to my whatever, my head of accounting? He knows what I want. He can, but as you're talking here, I'm realizing that the head of accounting has got very different issues than the CEO. And the head of accounting, what keeps him up at night is, that the books aren't closed on time and he can't figure out the process to solve that. Keeps the CEO up at night is something totally different. Like, what is he going to do with the business and ultimate profitability? And well, there's like a whole separate suite of issues. So you have this guy who's buying, but his problems are not the same as the problems for the guy he's buying. What we tried to
Yeah.
do is segment it into two things. Said, what can we do for you? What can we do for the CEO? If the CEO's not here, we can't really talk about that stuff because that's not your problem and doesn't make sense. But like, how
Yeah.
would you approach?
Well,
Because that
I'll
does
give you the
happen
short
where you
answer.
have the wrong person
Yeah,
being
I'll give you the
delegated.
short answer. There's not one buyer persona, right? So, if I was working with you, Gershon, I would say to you, okay, let's identify who all your buyer personas are. And we have to understand, are they economic buyers, decision makers, influencers, champions? There's different types of personas, and they're all going to have different pain and they're all going to have different goals. Your CEO might say, I can't trust my numbers, right? The accountant might say, I'm working 80 hours a week to try and stay ahead and I can't ever get ahead. So you want to be able to solve the pain of each individual buyer persona, and it's a different conversation with each buyer persona. In your example, I would explore, hey, Mr. CEO, I'm happy to talk to your accountant and see if I can provide some service for them, but tell me how this affects you. Why are we having this conversation? And I think you'll find that they're going to say things like, well, I can't trust my numbers, or, it's day 15 every month before I even see last month's data. It doesn't help me.
That would be good. This
Right.
company.
Yeah.
They're not getting it on day 15. That's for sure.
Okay. I'm going to keep going because we're going to run out of
Yeah.
time before you
Oh,
know
all
it.
right.
So I said this before, people make buying decisions on emotion and support it with data. And I can't emphasize this enough. This is really, really important. And I just did a whole session yesterday about this. And it's really important that your sales team understand that the best salespeople are serving and not selling. And I could spend a whole day talking about that. So let me just leave it with this. Customers are buying from you. That's more important than we're selling to them. What we're really trying to do is serve their needs. So in your example, Gershon, you have a CEO who runs a business who's having pain. Their needs are not being met by their current financial operations. Our job is to serve them. And there are ways in which we serve them with the products and services that we offer. So we just have to make sure that we're connecting with their needs and doing it in a way that enables us to connect emotionally with the buyer. Because if you do that, your probability of success goes way up. This is a much longer conversation. If anybody's interested in follow-ups, you can reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to take you through it. There's a whole science behind it. And it goes to understanding, the journey that a buyer goes on. There's a bunch of studies that were done on this out of Stanford, where they really looked at buyer behavior. And so let's just boil it down to, the journey that a typical buyer might go on, which is they start with some level of curiosity. They have a need, they have some pain, they have some curiosity. Could my pain be solved? And then they go out and look on the market for what kinds of solutions might be available for them. We do this in our own worlds, right? We're driving a car that's 10 years old, it's in and out of the shop. We know it's going to cost us a lot of money. So we start looking for what options there are and how much it might cost us. And then we may start sharing those ideas with, friends and family. Hey, I just saw this new car. It looks really interesting. What do you think? In the context of B2B, hey, I'm talking to, a few different companies about some, outsourced fractional CFO services. Have you ever heard of them? And this is where I think it would benefit me. And then they start to get down the path where they're justifying this decision with the data, right? And then they ultimately buy. So this is, an example of buyer behavior. And what we do in the sales process is try and match the way in which we sell to the journey that our buyers emotionally will go on. And so that takes us to process. And I'm going to talk about how you might define a sales process. Every organization may have a different process depending upon the products or services that they sell and the way in which their customers buy. So you're going to be starting off by asking some very basic questions. The first one is understand your own revenue, right? How do you generate revenue for your business? Is it one-time revenue? Is it recurring revenue? Is it guaranteed? Or are you on a 30-day month to month? Understand that and understand how it comes. Where do you grow? Do you grow by directly engaging with customers in the business development side? Do you have partnerships? Do you have strategic partnerships? Are you selling through channels? Where do these transactions come from? And is it recurring or is it one time? I said that before. I'm going to say that again because it's the way you manage your sales process and your overall business is very much a function of whether you're in a recurring revenue business or it's a one-time revenue business. And then the other thing that I see many businesses fail to acknowledge is that horrible A word, which is attrition. How long do you keep your customers? What is your customer lifetime value? Do you have ways in which you can influence that? And I say it at the bottom of the slide, which is you need to get real. So many times I'll meet with a business owner that says, I want to do 20 million next year. And then I start doing some exercises with them when I'm going to talk about how I do that. And I say, 20 million? I mean, I think if you can get to 15, that's a huge win. And let me show you why. So I go through a process every time with clients of mine, which is it's a three-legged stool. It's a top down, a bottoms up, and then I go around the world. And so what I do is I start by sitting with the business owner and saying, okay, tell me what you want to do. I want to do 20 million. Great. Let's do it bottoms up and figure out where that 20 million is going to come from. I've got 10 million coming from this customer segment. I got, 2 million coming from one particular customer. I got a rest coming from these customer segments. And then I have this unidentified of stuff I have to go sell. Well, that unidentified looks pretty big, but okay, let's park on that. Let's see how we can go figure that out. And that gets to accountability. This is really, really important. When you're building a sales forecast, every single dollar in your sales forecast has to have accountability next to it. I want to see somebody's initials next to every dollar of revenue that's forecasted for the business. Whether it's run rate revenue for recurring existing clients, there's an account manager, they're accountable for that revenue and the growth associated with those accounts. Or if it's net new revenue, I got to go sell, somebody is accountable. If you can solve for that, you're going to have a lot more comfort in your ability to hit those sales targets. Now you have a sales target, you got to understand what your process is to go achieve that unidentified. And a sales process is really a series of stages that your customer is going to go through with you to ultimately winning a deal. Now, there's another reason why this is really, really important, because customer acquisition cost is high. And the deeper you get into the sales process, the higher it is. So once you have a really good sales process and you've got criteria by which you can decide whether or not this is a good opportunity for us or not a good opportunity for us, you're going to be better off. If you're not going to win, you want to lose early. If you're going to fail, fail fast. If I'm talking with a prospective customer and it's my first meeting, and I realize coming out of that first meeting, this is not going to be a good fit for us, and I don't pursue it, that's very different than having had 10 hours of meetings and pulling 3 people in from my company to help support the sale and finding out at the end that this is not a good fit for us, right? So this is why, one of the reasons why a sales process is so critical to get right for your business. So what it is understanding when you start a sales process, there's kind of a fine line, or maybe a fuzzy line, let's call it, between business development and sales. So understanding when you're starting your sales process. Second is what has to happen before you move from stage to stage in the sales process, and what are those gating factors that define whether or not you've got from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So, for example, I'm going to show you again what I showed you before, a buyer journey, where they're going from curiosity to solutioning to sharing to justifying to buying, and then having a sales process that might map up against that, where you start with a lead, you then qualify that lead, you go do some discovery, you get to a proposal stage, and then there's a negotiation before you actually win and close. And in between every single one of those stages are gating factors. Is this deal in my addressable market? Do I understand the pain? Yes. Okay. Then let's take the next step and let's qualify it. And these are things that we're doing for ourselves. This doesn't take into account what your sales team is doing to further ingratiate themselves and connect emotionally with your buyer to keep them interested in you so that you can win. That's a whole separate conversation. But now we're in the qualify stage. Do they have budget? Do we understand who's the economic buyer? Is this a good fit? Is there urgency? Yes or no? If no, all right, I got to start curating that path to urgency earlier than I thought. Then we move into discovery. That's when we might get other people involved. If I'm Gershon, if I'm you, or I'm not you because you can do this on your own, but if I'm doing business development for you and I have somebody that, checks the boxes, they have budget, they have need, there's urgency, your example of what you talked about before, and I get this thing qualified, I might call you up and say, all right, Gershon, I need you to join me in a call to help me figure out what this customer really needs in order for me able to give them an economic proposal so they know how much it's really going to cost and what services I'm going to be providing for them. I'm also doing other things in the process. I'm telling stories, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm building professional trust. I'm analyzing their needs. I'm getting data. And again, I'm trying to create that path to urgency. Ultimately, get them a proposal. Here's a trick I'll share with all of you. This is really, really valuable trick. I encourage you all to do this. Here's what you don't do. Hey, Gershon, thanks for spending so much time with me today. I'm going to work up a proposal. It should be in your inbox by Friday. Let me know what you think. Okay. That's what you don't do. Here's what you do. Hey, Gershon, thanks for spending so much time with me. I think I have everything I need in order to be able to generate a proposal for you. I should have it ready by Friday. Tell me, pull out your calendar now and tell me what's a good time. I want to go over it with you in person. You want to do that as much as you can, because I want to be able to read the body language. I want to be able to feel whether my prospect thinks it's too expensive or thinks I missed the boat on what's really important. It gives me an opportunity to actually fix it before it's too late. So that's just a trick I employ. And then ultimately close, right? So that's an example process. Now, once you have a clear understanding of your sales process, now you can model it. And so let me show you an example of that. Let's see if this works. Yes. I can actually go in here and model what a sales process looks like. And I know, for example, I have a 10% probability of taking a lead to qualify. I have a 50% probability of moving it to discovery, a 50% probability of moving it to proposal, and a 90% probability from negotiate to close, for example. I can reverse engineer that to figure out what my probability is from stage to stage. So ultimately, I know to win one deal, I need 81 leads, for example, right? And if in fact that's wrong, I do a much better job qualifying. I understand my obtainable market. If this is more like 35%, in which case I only need 23 deals to close one. And then once you have that, you can then start to establish targets of how many deals do you want to have in your pipeline on any given time in order to be able to hit targets And then from there, you can actually build a whole revenue forecast that you can test against. And then from that, you can actually build comp plans. We'll come back to that in time. So the whole point is what I say about sales forecasts and sales process modeling is that the only thing I can guarantee with 100% certainty is that it's wrong. But it's directionally correct. And as you get more in tune with your sales process and your probabilities, you can tune it up. But this also helps you understand whether you're going to be ahead of the game or behind the game, right? These are the leading indicators in sales that are really, really important for you to be able to manage to know if you're going to find success. So once you have a good sales process, what do you have? You have a common data dictionary that can be followed by all within your organization, or particularly everybody that's in your sales team. You have an empirical methodology, so you know exactly where you stand and where you need to be in order to be able to hit your targets. If you're tracking this stuff, you're now building a strong database so that you can actually start to measure this and apply principles, data principles, even AI, to kind of figure out, what your year is going to look like. But you also have an operation that you can democratize that enables you to scale. So if you're one of those guys that's saying, I've been at $5 million and I can't seem to figure out how to get to 8 or 10, this is going to help you get there, because now you've got a model that you can scale. And you now have fundamentals that if you have a CRM, you'll be able to get some really good outputs. And if you don't, you can implement the CRM very easily around what your sales process is. Okay, let me take some time and talk about storytelling. So I said this before, people make buying decisions on emotion and support it with data. So early in the process, it's very different to telling, a story that says, this is why my company is so good. Here's how I helped this client. This is what they were able to accomplish because of the work I did. That's different than telling a hero story. A hero story is very different. A hero story is about the customer. Why that's important is when you're early in the sales process, Gershon, if you're my prospect and I say, Gershon, you remind me of this customer I used to have, Sally. Boy, when I met Sally, she was doing 80 hours a week. She was missing all of her kids' soccer games. And even with that 80 hours a week, she wasn't able to get, her board reports in on time. She was under constant pressure from the CEO. She always was at risk, felt like she was at risk of being fired. She had no way out. When she figured out that she could actually benefit from the services of a fractional CFO firm like Imperial, and we showed her how we could help her, she decided to take a shot at us. And by doing so, we were able to help her find ways of improving her ERP implementation, thus getting her data out more cleanly. Fast forward, she's down to 35 hours a week. She's not missed one of her kids' events. In fact, she was just telling me about, this dance recital that she was at, and she was just quelling about her kids' dance recital. And by the way, she got a promotion, and she's now a controller for the firm. Now, don't you want to be her, right? Telling that story early in the sales process is going to help you connect emotionally with your buyer, because your buyer is going to be like, I want to be Sally. And you're paving the way for a much better probability of winning. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They connect emotionally. Your buyer wants to be that hero. And so in a perfect world, if we're being truly academic, earlier I talked about building buyer personas. Every buyer persona you build should have a hero story associated with it that your sales team can draw upon and tell early in the sales process. Now, that might be a little aspirational, but the point is that as you go on with your business, you're looking for those stories, and you're looking for ways in which you can actually write those things down and empower your sales team with it. Okay, let me shift and talk about building a sales team. Many of my clients, that's one of the reasons why they hire me, is they know that they need to grow a sales team. They just don't know how to do it, right? And one of the most common mistakes that I feel that businesses make is when they decide they're going to go hire a salesperson, the first place they think is, all right, who are my competitors and how am I going to peel somebody away? I think about that. If I wanted to hire a killer salesperson and I'm going to go try and peel them away from one of my competitors, the odds are that person's either not a killer salesperson or they're having some issues with their company that you're going to end up having with them too, right? So I say focus less on the industry and the skills that they have in the products or services, and focus more on the buyer personas that you're serving, and make sure that they will connect well with your buyer persona. And look for these attributes. You want people that are curious. You want people that are competitive. You don't want people that are perfect. You want people that are coachable. You want people that own their mistakes, that take accountability. That's really key. And by the way, I will say that some of the best people I've managed actually don't actually have all these qualities. They might be prima donnas and might be pretty dramatic. And as a sales manager, you got to put up with that stuff. Remember, when you're a sales manager, your strength is not selling. Your strength is leading and helping your salespeople be the best that they can be. And so I equate this to the metaphor of, let's see, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift has a manager. Is Taylor Swift's manager telling Taylor Swift how to sing? I don't think so. I think what Taylor Swift's manager is doing is breaking down barriers for Taylor to be better and be able to reach more people and be able to find ways to improve her overall revenue, her sales, right? That's what managers do in sales. So when you're looking for salespeople, you want to find people that you can manage well and that will take to your coaching and are going to do well with the buyer personas that you're serving. And so when I hire new, aside from having a 90-day onboarding plan, which I think is really, really important, I'm going to come to that third, is always have an onboarding buddy. An onboarding buddy in the ecosystem of your business that isn't not necessarily in sales, that can answer the proverbial metaphorical question, where is the bathroom? Sometimes they help in navigating things like, oh, gee, I have an issue. How should I approach Gershon with this issue, right? Little things like that. Just help them get assimilated to the business. You should have a checklist. This 90-day onboarding list should be a checklist of things that we're doing to help serve your new salesperson to help them be successful. But the flip side of that is what I do when I'm hiring a new salesperson is before we even make the offer, I'm having conversations with them about what their 30, 60, 90 is going to look like in their world. How do they define success for themselves? And making sure it marries up really, really well with the goals and aspirations of the business. Because if I can develop these skills by the salesperson, not for the salesperson, they're going to have a greater sense of accountability in hitting those goals. Finally, incentive compensation. This is the one thing I would say it's almost 100% of the time when I engage with a client, this is something that isn't right. There's lots of reasons why incentive compensation plans are wrong. One is how much are you actually paying? If you're in an agency like business, for example, like you are, Gershon, your targets should be around 10% of sales. I've seen everything from way too low to way too high, right? So that's a hot overall metric in agency types of sales. But most importantly, the incentive compensation plan has got to be 100% aligned with the ownership of the business. The way in which they operate, their culture, the way they think, it's got to feel comfortable. It's got to align with what the goals of the business owner are. Some business owners are purely focused on the profitability that they generate for themselves. Some are focused on growth. Some are focused on an exit strategy, and they're appealing to private equity or a potential M&A. It depends. You really need to understand what that is, and the comp plan has to be associated with that. Where it's possible, I like to have a 50-50 plan. 50 meaning 50% guaranteed, 50% incentive based. So, base salary of 100, the on-target earnings should be 200. Now that's pretty idealistic. It's not always going to be 50-50. It could be 60-40, 70-30. It could be 30-70. It could be all over the map, but I started a baseline of 50-50. And it also needs to incent for continued acceleration, meaning you don't want a salesperson to say, I hit my targets, I can take the rest of the year off. You want that incentive plan to say, I hit target 1, now I can go for target 2. Now I can go for target 3, target 4. There's this constant incentive to do better and better and better. Because what I find is that your top performers are the ones you really want to be investing more in and finding ways to build a plan that help them achieve greater and greater and greater goals. Many sales managers fall into the trap of spending way too much time with the bottom performers to try and make them successful. It's probably a waste of time. Move them out, get top performers in there. Okay. Let me see. We got 15 minutes left. Great. I'm going to take a little bit of time and just talk about CRM for 5 minutes. And then after that, I'm happy to take questions or any other issues that people want to talk about. So, in my experience, probably 3/4 of the businesses that I serve have some level of a CRM, but 100% of them have not implemented it to the best of the CRM's ability. I don't mean the company's ability, I mean CRM's ability. I've denoted a few of the CRMs that are out there that are pretty popular, of course, Salesforce being the big one. My personal favorite today is Pipedrive. Last year it was HubSpot, but Pipedrive has really made some really great strides. I know Monday.com has recently released a version of a CRM. I think they're going to very quickly get to pole position just because of the amount of product investment that they're making. I have customers in the manufacturing and distribution businesses that use NetSuite as an ERP. Their CRM functionality is actually pretty good. So if you're using NetSuite already, instead of having an add-on CRM system, you might explore just looking at their own CRM functionality because it actually does a pretty good job. The key to CRM is not so much about the fact that you're using it, it's how you're using it. The important thing about a CRM is that it truly is a tool for your sales team. What I find a lot is that the implementation of the CRM is more management centric, and so it's driven around the reporting and the data that we're trying to get out. Here's the thing. There's a joke in our industry. Why is Salesforce called Salesforce? Because you have to force salespeople to use it. But that's not a crack on Salesforce. It's a crack on the companies that implement it for themselves. It's one of those tools that can be way over-engineered because of the flexibility of the tool. And then it becomes so cumbersome for the sales team to use that they're like, ugh, I don't really want to use it. And truthfully, that's probably the case for all of the ones I'm highlighting here and others. Don't over-engineer the thing. Make sure that it's a tool that the sales team can be using to manage all their day-to-day activity. It's a personal assistant for them. It can give them nudges. Hey, don't forget, you got to call Gershon to follow up on that conversation you had with them last week, right? It's a tool that you can use to be marketing and nurturing a bunch of leads or penultimate leads. It's a tool that can be used to manage a process and keep you on top of all this amount of activity that you need to be able to hit your target. The secondary goal of the CRM is to get that data and then be able to use it to do great forecasting and get some insights that might help you figure out how to sell more. But if you're not getting the data in from your sales team, you're not going to get any data out. So make sure you're implementing in a way that serves your sales team well. And by the way, for those of you not using a CRM, if you're not using a CRM, you're leaving money on the table because you need some sort of tool to be able to be having a consistent level of outreach to your addressable market to make sure that you're branding yourself to them and ultimately driving inbound. At a minimum, if you're not doing that, you can use a CRM for that. So that takes us to the end. So thank you. I will stop sharing the screen. There we go. And I'm happy to take any questions. Okay.
All right. If no one has any questions, I'll start.
Sure.
Is there any reason to create a sales comp cap? Is there ever a scenario where that's appropriate to say you're not going to make more than blank?
You mean a cap?
A cap.
So in my opinion, 0. I would never, ever, ever put a cap on a sales comp plan. Now, if you're a type of business and you're in a more commoditized world where you're selling a product and there's a limit to how much you can actually sell because of your own capacity constraints, you might be faced with some issues like that. But I don't know that I would handle it through capping a comp plan. I might handle it through different strategies other than that.
Got it. And you mentioned earlier when you spoke of sales comp percentages, it was of revenue. Um, I'm familiar with someone I used to work for. He was the CFO of I think a software company, a SaaS company. And he said that they had a situation where they had the salespeople selling product at below cost and still getting commission. Is that, and as a CFO, he wasn't very happy about that. Um, in a less extreme case where salespeople have the ability to change prices, maybe not to losing, but do you typically adjust sales comp to reflect profitability, or do you just like how do you approach that?
Yeah. So if I'm faced with that type of a business and I've had that exact situation before, um, there's two elements to it. Number one, the rate that you pay could be on margin, not on revenue. That's one way to combat that. But the more important way is that every incentive compensation plan for the company should have some level of governance where salespeople are authorized to discount to a certain level, and anything over that requires the approval of the sales manager or the CEO or whatever. And without being able to give you a firm answer, I would need to have more understanding of the culture of the business, the organizational structure of the business, and how you would implement something like that. But yeah, that is something that's got to stop immediately. That can't happen.
Well, I worked for the guy 10 years ago. He had been out of that job for 30 years, so
Yeah.
or 20, or I don't know, for a while. Um,
Yeah,
okay.
I had a client once that sold a handful of SKUs, and the owner really wanted to lean into certain SKUs, and so we created different commission rates for different SKUs to kind of drive behavior towards a certain level of SKU.
Okay.
And we didn't pay on profit, but what we did do is we did say that at these price points you got 100% of your commission. At these price points you only got 75% of your commission.
Got it. Okay. I have some more questions, but let's see if anyone else here has anything to ask, comment.
Hey, how about any recommended readings or like folks out there that are kind of I don't know. Personally, there's a lot of books people have recommended. I've read them, and I think a lot of them are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, not very good. Anything out there that you really feel like is a go-to resource, recommended reading that you recommend to folks on the sales side?
Mm. That's a good question. Lately the books that I've been reading are more outside of that lane. I mean, there's one that I read a few years ago called The Qualified Sales Manager. I can't remember who wrote it. It's fundamentally about managing sales in sort of a SaaS world. But I like it because it really leans into the sales process.
Yep.
And managing against the sales process. So that's a pretty good one. Another book I read, which is not about sales, but because I'm a sales guy, it influenced me in sales. It's called First Break All the Rules. Lesson I took from that as a sales manager is what I said. Managers tend to fall into the trap of spending way too much time trying to fix unproductive people. And if you take that time and imagine what happens if you allocate that to time spent with your most productive people, the impact that can have on your organization. And so I apply that principle in sales. I like to spend more time with my successful salespeople and less time with my unsuccessful salespeople.
Yeah, it's good. This is good information today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Everyone, we just put up the poll. If you can take a few seconds to answer that, that would be helpful. Anyone wants to reach out, speak with Jay or someone from our team, just answer the poll or reach out to Brittany, and she'll get you in touch. Any other questions? Any thoughts, comments? Thanks so much. That's a comment. Anyway, thank you all for joining.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Jay, for a very, very interesting webinar. You know, sometimes I want to go back and watch it again. This is one of those times. So you know, there's a lot of great nuggets in here that I gotta think about some more. So we really appreciate you. I really appreciate you joining us. I'm sure everyone else does as well.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for asking me to do this, Gershon. It's really been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it. And, you know, you feel free to, you know, reach out to me either on LinkedIn. You can, that's probably the best way to find me. You can find me on LinkedIn. And also I will tell you that I'm in this situation now. You know, I've seen situations before where part of the challenge we have in sales management is that we need to have a reliable source of data of revenue and profitability. And if that's not there, then you need to be reaching out to Gershon because he can help you with that too. And you know, there has to be there has to be trustworthy financial data in order for any of this to work. So it's very symbiotic that we're doing this together.
All right.
Okay. On that note, I'll say goodbye to everybody. Thanks again for your time. I appreciate your attention to this. I hope it helped. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Sounds
All
good.
the best to everybody. Gershon,
Thank you
nice
all.
to see you. Take care.
Bye, Jay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.